to the point where we actually build something we can also use. The whole promise of this masterclass is that we want to build something from a wire to final working product, and therefore we'll sparkle in some AI work here and there, especially for the coding part. After talking with my teams, I have realized a lot of changed in the landscape. I thought it would be really cool to create a masterclass which is tailored around those changes. I have also prepared a small Figma playground in the description, which you can use to follow along. The whole playground will evolve naturally, which means that we will add more content over time. It's not only interesting for the professionals, it should be also a starting point for new designers. Therefore, the first one can be quite boring for our professionals, but a perfect foundation for our starters. In this first video, we will go through the Figma layout, discussing the layout section by section, which means top, left, bottom, and right part. Therefore, I tried to set the jump marks and also some visualizations so that you can easily jump through the sections you are most interested in. If this one is already too basic for you, no worries, ensure that you're subscribed and stay updated on the upcoming videos, which will be way more interesting. At this point, unsure if it will be your web application, or maybe even a smartphone app. I prepared a small pool. Feel free to vote on it so that we can create this masterclass together. That's all. I'm Dave, and jump in. Let's start with the big area in the center of the screen, which is called the canvas. The canvas is our main working canvas. On the canvas you can put everything. It's kind of an infinite canvas, which means there are no limits like you may know from Photoshop or other tools. On the playground, I've also collected some shortcuts for you, so that you can learn how to navigate the playground either via mouse or via trackpad. But for now, the shortcuts should be sufficient enough, so that you can work with it and already learn them before we add more complexity later on. And as I guess you are all on a notebook, at least most of you, you can pinch to zoom to make everything bigger or smaller, which enables you to zoom far out or go far in to see all the small details. What we see here right now is the Figma canvas itself is vector-based. In contrast to Photoshop, this means that you can zoom in as much as you want and still have crisp edges. The only downside here is why you should activate the pixel grid, like you can see here right now, is that when you create something like icons which are not perfectly aligned with the pixel grid, you risk that they will be a bit blurry, and this should be avoided. And that's why I activate the pixel grid as well as the pixel snap to ensure that all your designs looks fine, also in export and on the live website. To activate the pixel perfect view, we go to the actions at the bottom, enter pixel, and then we ensure that snap to pixel grid is activated as well as show pixel grid, so that we get a feeling for the pixels if needed and avoid typical errors, which can destroy and waste a lot of time. So ensure that you have activated both options. Let's come to our top bar. The top bar kind of houses all our active files we are working on right now. You should close them from time to time as they will waste some of your resources. That's why I try to keep it clean. Let's go from top to right. On the top edge you can see the home icon, which navigates you back to your home area of Figma, where you can see all your active files and projects. And right from it we have our tabs, which represents the opened files right now. If you hover them, you get a small preview of all of your files. And right from it we have the Add New File Open Recent icon, which is marked with this plus. We can either click the plus or click Ctrl Command T to activate it. And there we see our recent files, which means that we can just search for files and open them if needed. And for sure, we can also add new files. The nice thing here is from here we can access all the Figma related files, like creating new design files, creating new Figma files, creating new Fix slides, as well as Figma bus, sites and make files. We will go to each of them in detail later on. For now, the Figma design is the most relevant one, as well as the FigJam. FigJam is kind of your interactive whiteboard where you can brainstorm ideas or collaborate with others to come up with new ideas. For sure, same with the usual design files. Let's close it by either click on the tab on the X button or Ctrl W. And then far to the right we can find the caret. The caret houses a lot of window management features. We will not go into detail yet, as most of them are not really relevant for our daily workflow. But you should definitely check them out to learn more about them and to get a feeling about the possibilities here. Another nice tip for the tab bar is that you can drag and drop any file from the tab bar to the active canvas to activate the split screen mode. Therefore, we go with the mouse to the top, hovering one of the tabs, and then drag the tab into the canvas. Then you will already see the blue area highlighted. And we can decide if we want to drag them on the left or on the right. In this case, we put them on the right. Activate the minimal UI on the left one, so that we have a little bit more space for the design. What you can do now is you can select specific elements from the left or from the right and copy-paste it into the other. Therefore, you don't need the split screen. You can also do it with anything else, also with different tabs. But it's a handy feature if you just want to have your references on the left or your brainstorming or even a design system so that you can easily navigate and check out everything what you need. It's just a handy feature. You can use it, you can avoid to use it, it's totally on you. Let's end the split screen by going up with the mouse again, clicking on the right button, and then click on Separate Tabs, which will separate the tabs again. A small trick, you can also drag a tab outside of the window, like this one, and then drag it outside so that you open a new window, which can be quite helpful, especially with the magnetic snaps, where you have similar features like in the splits view, but a little bit more advanced, I think so. Because in this mode, you can have different tabs for each window, which can be quite handy. And especially for the Windows users out of you, Windows is smart enough to save the tab groups, which means you can also restore the tab groups at any time, which is pretty handy, especially if you multitask a lot like I tend to do. And for sure, you can also drag each of those files and move it back into the main window to ensure that you have everything there. Just play with it and see how you can integrate it into your daily. And then we have our left sidebar, which gives us a glimpse of the file structure, including all the linked assets and files, as well as the components we have created in this file. In the Figma Worker menu, we can find all the Figma-related file actions and operations, which are mostly not as interesting. So that's why feel free to check them out to get a feeling for the possibilities here. But we will not discuss them here, as most of them you will probably not use, at least not in this way. What is important and pattern you will see across Figma is that we have our actions, and then right from it we see Ctrl K, which is the actual shortcut to trigger the actions. This is something Figma does quite well. Let's try it. Open the burger menu, see actions, and then we see Ctrl K. Let's go to the canvas and click Ctrl K, and we will see that our actions panel will open. On the actions panel we have the possibility to either search for everything across Figma, which means we can search for specific features like the pixel grid, or for any plugin like Contently. Done. And we can also search for assets like a button. Click on assets, and then we can find all the assets related to buttons. Figma tries to be a little bit more intelligent here, which means it tries also to interpret if this one could be a button or not, which can work quite well in some cases. But in all cases, you should be able to find whatever you search for. And then we have plugins and widgets. In this one, we only search for plugins and widgets. It shows not only the installed plugins, it shows also all the plugins from the Figma community, like Notely. shows us Notely as well as similar plugins. And then we have our minimize button. The minimize button is quite handy as it will give you more state for all of your content. What's nice about the minimize button or the minimize UI is that it is context-based, which means if we select nothing, we will have a clean layout. But when we select something like the typo from the top bar, we'll see that the right bar expands and shows us all the options as well as prototype possibilities, which we will discuss later on. Let's train our shortcut muscles. Therefore, we hover the file name and the already the expand UI, as well as the related shortcut. Instead of clicking the button, we try to use a shortcut. Therefore, let's click Ctrl, Shift, and the backslash, and we can hide and show the quick menu. It's probably not the most used shortcut here, but let's try to go into the right mood to learn the shortcuts step by step by step to accelerate our workflow over time. Underneath we have the file name as well as the related project identifier, which gives us an idea about the project name and our file name. And right from the file name we have a context menu, which shows us more file-related actions. In this case, like always, we can ignore it yet, but there's one thing we should learn more about, so show version history. But before we do so, let's click on the file name, which will trigger directly an edit mode so that we can edit our file name. You can just enter something, click enter, and it will be saved. As easy as it can be, if you click the project underneath, you will directly open the project folder, which can be nice. Let's go back to the caret menu and the version history. If we click on the version history, we'll see on the right side that the version history will open. The nice thing with Figma is Figma will save all your changes, which means you can play and experiment as much as you want. No worries, everything will be saved and you can go back at any time. Like you can see here, Figma has saved all the changes I did so far, so that I have a history of my file progress and I could jump back at any time. So for example, if I have by accident deleted something, I could jump into any of those timeframes and then recover it. Let's try it for a second. Let's remove the Figma layout top bar. Oh no, it's removed. We can either click Ctrl Z to bring it back, but let's imagine this is already a while ago and I just recognized I have deleted it by accident. Then I can go to the version history, can check out the latest changes, and if it's done I can see the state. Then I can just click on the frame, copy paste, Ctrl C, go back to the current state and paste it back in again. Whoop. And it's back. Let's open the version history again. Figma does not only autosave all the changes you do in Figma, you can also trigger your own changes, which is necessary at some point, because the version history will delete itself over time, just to keep it clean. Therefore, what you can do is, what I also did here is, I created a custom checkpoint. In this case, I called it stable before video release. Let's create our own custom checkpoint. Therefore, we can go on the top, click the plus, and give it a name, like video checkpoint. Click save, and we could also add a description. And then we see here that the video checkpoint popped up, and if we click on it, we can go back to exactly this file position at any time. Okay, close it, as it isn't relevant anymore. And let's go to the next part. For the next part, we see the files and asset steps as well as a global search. For the files, which are active right now, we see that we have underneath the file structure. In this case, we have the different pages. For those different pages in the playground example, we have our playground file, which includes all the artboards from the playground. And then we have a cover, which includes the cover, which can be quite handy if you want to structure your files a little bit better, as you can make it a little bit more visual. So for example, if you hover over the UX Wire 3.0, We can see that the preview will open. The preview will try to use the cover image. Therefore, it's quite handy if we can put on there the actual state, stakeholders, and stuff like that, especially if you work in a bigger organization where it's important to make the files as readable as possible. Therefore, I tend to have cover images just to make it easier to find the right files at any time. And then we have document assets. Document assets are therefore, in this case, I used it for the Notely plugin, which saves all the node templates here, as well as all the components I used to create the playground. And what I also like to do for not file-related pages, like cover and document assets, I like to create a new page and use a --, click Enter on a new page, and then it creates this separator, which makes it even easier to separate your content. And underneath we can find the layers panel. The layers panel is pretty handy. If you've already worked with HTML or DOM elements, you're probably already familiar with the term nesting. In this case, what Figma does a lot and what you should do as a designer, you should nest as much as you can to create the logical layouts, which then can also utilize features like the auto layout or prototyping features we will discuss later on. So in general, the layers panel will give you an overview top-down to all of your created Figma layouts, designs, and layers. In the layers panel, on each of those layers, we can find a caret to expand and shrink the whole nesting to see what is inside the layers. We can also see on hover that we have a lock icon on the right as well as a show and hide icon. The lock icon will lock your elements, which means you cannot select them anymore. Try it on this one. Nope. Select something on the canvas and you will directly see how it jumps inside the layer panel. Figma layout. And now we think, hey, I don't want to select it by accident. So we can toggle the lock. And now it's not possible to select the element anymore by accident, but in some cases it could be necessary to select the element. Therefore, what we can do is we can click Ctrl or Command and then the right mouse button, which will also trigger the selection, like you can see here on the left side, so that we can remove the lock again. Same for the toggle layer visibility, which should ideally only used for prototyping. If you don't need it anymore, you should delete it. But for prototyping, it can be quite sufficient to hide and show layers from time to time. And then we see all the nestings, so that we can select all the elements step by step. Small tip here, normally when you want to reach the text here, the left sidebar, you need to go either inside the layer panel to the bottom layer, or on the canvas you need to double press as often as you can until you reach the deepest layers, but you can also press Ctrl Command and then click directly with the mouse on the element so that you jump straight into the deepest nesting, which is pretty handy, especially when your files get bigger. Okay, make it a little bit smaller. What we can also do, especially for playgrounds like this, we can select the start. Not necessary, but we do it for reasons. And then we can click Tab. With Tab, we will jump through each of the elements on the actual hierarchy, which means in this case we will jump top down based on the layer position. If we click Tab, we'll go one level deeper. But if we click Shift Tab, we will jump to the last one. So Tab going forward, Shift Tab going backward. But like mentioned, it's not like you're going forward and backward based on the layer position on the canvas. You always navigate based on the layer position in the layers panel top down. The nice thing here is we can also go one level deeper by pressing Enter. And then we see that we have selected now everything. With Shift Enter, we can go higher in the hierarchy. But for a second, let's stick one layer down. And if we click Shift and if we click Tab here, we'll see that we will also navigate inside this hierarchy, inside this nesting, through each of the elements forward and backward, which can be quite handy. I guess most of you will probably not use it, but if you use it, it can be quite helpful for specific functions, especially if you also want to work with auto layouts. Okay, let's go back to the top layer. Let's go back to the top layer. And another handy thing, after we've opened so much of our layers, it can look quite chaotic right now, but there's an easier helper feature which you can use. It's right to the layers title. We have our collapse layers button, and if we click it, it will collapse all the layers again, so that the layers panel looks clean and is easier to scan. After we have discussed already the whole file step, let's move further to the assets and search. I think as it makes sense, we go to the search first. The search button, we hover it. We can see it's a find button actually, and have the shortcut Control F. So instead of just clicking it, we try to use the shortcut Control F. Okay, search it triggered, and from here on we can search button. The nice thing with the search is it will search for all layers as well as text, which includes the search term. You can not only search on the actual page, you can also search on all pages, which can be quite helpful from time to time, especially if you want to correct something. And what is even cooler is you can also use a replace, which means, for example, instead of writing bottom with a small b, we want to write bottom with a small b on all occasions. Therefore, we type in bottom and click replace all, and now all the occasions have been replaced with bottom with a big B. Nice. You can also use it for different other use cases, but I think for simplicity, that's okay for now. Let's jump to the assets. The assets panel houses all of your assets, which means all the assets you've created in the actual file or all the assets you've linked from other files. You can either search for them directly by using the search or the actions menu we have learned before. Let's search something. Okay, we see all the assets related to the search term, and then we can drag and drop them. Right from it, you can also find some configuration. For example, to switch between grid and list. Let's remove our search term to have a little bit more options here. There we have also the checkmark for show folders and subfolders, which can be quite handy depending on your file structure for sure. To show you what I mean, let's go to the UX Wire 3.0. Let's make it click on it, and then we see the file structure. The file structure we see here right now represents the pages I've created for the wireframe kit, which is sorted in the atomic design way, which means on the atom level we find all the atoms, like the buttons. If we click through the layers, we can copy-paste our buttons inside our new file to use it there. So structure is important in Figma, but not necessary. So if you are more in favor of an unstructured file, it's also totally fine, because you can always use Ctrl-K and search for the asset you need, like button. Click on assets, the button appears. You can also use Shift-I to directly search for components, which makes it even easier. Add more libraries will enable you to add more libraries from all your files, and you will also have access to some of the UI kits Figma provides, like in this case the iOS and material design, as well as a simple design system by Figma itself. If we click Add to File, you will see that it will appear directly on the left sidebar and shows us all the related files, so that we can already use it here. Drag and drop. The cool thing is, if any of those have an update, you will see the update notification in your working file. For example, let's change something on the wireframe kit and make it visible. Make it reddish. Then we see the blue bubble, which will hint us that we need to publish our changes. Therefore, we can click Publish and see that Figma will update all the components, which nests this element I've just changed. so that we can publish it. And then you will see the same blue notification bubble on the other file, where you can easily update them. To save some time, I will not do it yet. Let's jump back to the files, and with this one, I think we have finalized our left sidebar. Let's go to the button bar. The button bar houses all our main tools, structured by type, and also the mode switcher. In detail, let's go here to make it a little bit more appealing. So for the move, which is actually selected, if we hover it, we see also here the name of the tool, as well as the related shortcut. And if we click the right caret, we can also see the related elements, like in this case, it's the hand tool as well as the scaler, including the move tool. For the move, if we have selected the move, that's selected, we can select any element on the canvas to move it around by dragging it in the related position. Figma tries to be smart here, which means if we have something inside a frame and drag it outside a frame, Figma will try to make the next logical thing by moving it outside the frame. If we move it back inside the frame, it will be moved inside the frame again. A nice handy trick here is if you drag your element and then click after you're dragging it, or while you're dragging it, the spacebar, Figma will stop to nest the elements automatically so that you can move around without any layout shifts or without Figma trying to nest it inside a frame. As far as we release the spacebar, let's release it, you see that Figma starts again to move the element inside the frame. Let's undo our changes. And then we have also the hand tool. For the trackpad users among us, this one isn't as relevant. But if you're a mouse user, it's kind of handy, because then let's go to the mouse. You can select the hand tool, but before selecting it, let's open the context menu again, see the hand tool and the related shortcut, H. Let's click H to select the hand tool, and then we can move through the canvas by dragging the canvas, as long as the mouse cursor is activated. If we go back to the move tool, clicking here on our keyboard, we can not move anymore. So clicking H again to move. But small trick here, you can also keep spacebar pressed, which will also transform your cursor into this hand icon, so that you can move your canvas again as long as you keep the spacebar pressed. And if you release it, it will go back to the last used tool, in this case the move tool. So besides the move and the hand tool, we have also the scale tool. The scale tool can be used for icons and stuff like that. And the nice thing is it scales the whole element and also the related effects you have added there, which can be quite handy, but if you have more complex components, you should try to avoid it, as it tend to be a little bit buggy and break components here and then. Therefore, if you have icons, use the scaler. If you want to scale an effect, use the scaler. But if you want to scale a complex component, you should avoid using it, because it will eventually lead to some bugs along the way. The scale tool itself, like you can see on the right side, will also change the whole right panel. Let's deactivate it for a second. So default view is our right panel with all the details related to the actual selected element, and when we click K, the bottom part will change to the scalar settings, which enables us to scale by multiplier, like 2 times, or scale by pixel values. We can also use 0.5 to make it half the size. And we can use the scaler also directly on the element to scale it, which will scale everything rather well. Let's try to include an icon by pressing Shift-I or opening the action panel, then search for icon. And if we are lucky enough, we have probably one icon here. Let's go with this one. This one looks a little bit more complicated. Change the color to something more visible. And if we scale it without the scaler, it will probably look like this. In this case, it worked quite well despite not changing the stroke width and the scale and the effects, but it's still okay. Let's create a second one for a second. Scale the first one with the usual move tool. and then click K to scale the second one with the scaler, either by entering a number like 4 or scaling it by pressing one of the drawers on the edges. Here we can scale it in the original size by pressing Shift, which will lock the ratio, or we can release the Shift to scale it however we want to scale it. But let's keep it with Shift. And we already see the difference between scaling via the Scale tool and scaling with the Move tool. Scaling with the Move tool will just make things bigger, which is totally fine and perfect in most cases. But if you want to scale also the effects, you should use the Scale tool. And here we are also lucky, because in some cases, scaling with the Move tool, especially when there are more complex shapes, it tends to break things, which worked quite well here. Okay, let's remove both of them. Frames and sections. The frames are your foundation, which means everything what you build in Figma will be based on frames. For the frame tool, you have different options. Let's do the drill, hammer the frame tool, learn the shortcut, it's F. Let's create our first frame. Therefore, let's go somewhere on the canvas. Either select the frame tool or using the related shortcut like F. If you look on the right side, we can already see some of the presets Figma provided us with, which makes it really easy to start your project. In this case, we have different categories like phone, tablet, desktop, presentation, watch, paper, social media, Figma community, and also some outdated files. Let's create this quick Android medium. Yeah, let's create an Android frame. Click on the frame and it will automatically create this strange looking Android frame. Let's try again. Use Android compact, which looks more like a smartphone frame. Nice. And then we would also like to create a desktop frame. Let's say typical desktop. Okay, it looks already nice. And then we would also like to create a watch face. Let's say Apple Series 10. Nice. Curious to see the design. And then I need probably also a Twitter post. Click on Twitter post. Nice. We've already created some frames we can use to build up our designs. This is one method to create your frames. Another one is you can just select the frame tool and click somewhere on the canvas, and it will create a frame based on the last selected preset, which can be quite helpful. You can also select the frame tool and then drag it across the canvas to create a custom frame on the size you would like to have. That's already nice. And then let's create the shape inside it. Okay, that's nice. And what we can do right now is we can click or activate the frame tool again. And if you have a frame with the active frame tool, you will see the left and right blue bubble thing. And if you hover one of the bubbles, a plus will appear. If you click on it, it will create a duplicate of the frame so that you can make edits inside it. You can also keep pressed Alt and move it somewhere on the canvas to create the duplicate, or you can use Ctrl D to make duplicates. Ctrl D is rather cool. For this one, press Alt, keep it pressed, and then drag the red bubble on the canvas. Then zoom in a little bit, look on the handle here, and then move it slightly so that we have kind of this Pac-Man. And then we keep pressed Alt and move it to the side, rotate it slightly. And if we then press Ctrl D for duplicate, you will see that Figma will repeat your action over and over and over again, so that you can create some interesting effects with it, which can be especially helpful if you want to animate something. Okay, let's remove it. And let's check out the section tool. Therefore, we go back to our frame menu and select sections or click Shift S. The sections are rather handy. In contrast to the frames, they are not there to design something with it. It's more like an organizational piece. Let's create our first section by selecting the section tool, and then we drag our section across all the files. What we can see while we are dragging it, similar to the frame, we will see this blue box, this blue rectangle. And when we make it bigger, it will also group everything inside this selection, which is the same for the frames. So far, so good. If we release it, we will see that it has created the section. The nice thing with the section is if you zoom out, you can also see that the section title will scale, which is nice. And you on the section title on the right, you have also the ready for dev, which is an indicator that the developers can use it right now. And it's remove the state. You can use the sections also for prototyping quite well, because the prototype will remember the last frame you used inside the section, which is pretty handy, especially if you have a product landing page with different products. The section will remember the last active product, so that you can jump forth and back in your prototype and will land exactly on the last used page, which can be quite helpful, especially for prototyping. Okay, I think that's all for the sections. Let's do something new. We select the move tool if not selected already, and then we will drag it across the canvas, starting from an empty space, until we see the blue rectangle. The blue rectangle will select everything underneath, and then we will delete everything here. And while doing so, I recognized another pattern. Last but not least, we have also our slices tool. For the slices tool, this is something we used around 20 years ago. Nowadays, I'm not sure if it's even usable or applicable. What we did centuries ago is, in some cases, in the old days, we had layouts made of images, as HTML and CSS was kind of limited. Therefore, we needed to cut up all the images in different parts. Fast forward, I just prepared the slices. So we have now our frame, and our frame is our badge. And inside the frame we have also our slices, 1 to 5. One slice for every edge of the graphic, as well as one slice for the centerpiece. We select all of them in the layers panel. And then we add an export option. In this case, I've added the PNG. And click Export Layers. And then we export the layers inside a new folder. And then we see that Figma have exported all the frames, or the slices of the graphic, into different... Let's check the preview. In the preview we can see that we've nicely sliced up the image. Like mentioned, I'm not sure if this is still helpful nowadays, as we have better technology and more features to handle elements like that. We can either just use a simple PNG, which was already hard those times. But if you find a use case for it, please let me know in the comments. I personally stopped using it already 20 years ago. Good old times. It was horrible. It was truly horrible, to be honest. Let's move to the next tool group, which is the Figma elements, aka rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon, star, as well as image and videos. Those ones are handy if you want to create something more visual, especially the star, or the circle, or the ellipse. Same drill like always. Go to the bottom bar, check out the tools, learn about the shortcuts. In this case, let's use the star as it is more interesting. Let's select the shape tool again and then drag it across the canvas to create a custom size. Here, the same like for the frames and sections. We can either create our custom shape, or we can click Shift to lock it, so that we have a nice and clean star. If we placed our element, we can zoom in a little bit, and then we will also see the drawer or handles. If we hover over them, we can already see what they are doing. In this case, it says radius 0. Radius 0, therefore we drag the handle to change the shape of the star. In this case, we want to make a cuter star. Then we select the ratio, this one. Move it a little bit to make the star a little bit more friendly. And then we have also the count. The count will change this spikes of the star, so that you can also create a nice badge with it. And done. And it's the same for all the other tools. Create an ellipse by activating the ellipse tool, and then click on an empty space on the canvas and drag the element while you keep pressed, so that you have this nice shape. To lock the aspect ratio, we click Shift. So this one looks better. Zoom in a bit, and then we see the nice handle. We move the handle, more handles will appear. And with one of those handles, we can move the start and end position, as well as changing the state, which is nice for dashboards. So put it this way, and then drag the center handle, which will also give us a small gap, which is perfect for creating charts. You can either move it to the left or to the right. In any case, it will change the appearance. If you move it closer to the open spot, like we do here right now, then you will see that it will only fill the open spot instead of the rest of the element. It's pretty cool, huh? And then combine it with the appearance on the right side. Add some border radius, and then you have a nice little circle. That's a cool graph. Okay, let's continue with the image element. The image element is something I use rarely, for the simple reason I think it's mostly not really needed. If you clicked on it, you can either click on the canvas to put the image or drag it across the canvas. What I normally tend to do is I create a frame, and then I add a new fill. For the fill, I select images and click the image and done, which will do exactly the same like we've seen before. Oops, set the image to 100%. So let's remove the image again. Another thing you can do is you can copy paste appearances or image configurations or element configurations by just clicking on the image, for example. In the image itself, we can see that it also uses only an image fill for the image, and therefore we can click on the left side of the fill until we have seen this blue selection around this element. Press Ctrl or Command C, which will copy this configuration, and then we click on the new frame and click also Command or Ctrl V to paste it, so that we've pasted the image from the image element to the frame, which gives us some possibilities here. I personally like to focus mostly on frames, so everything in my layouts is a frame actually. It feels just better to work with, because then you can also use auto layout and all the stuff, which isn't possible with the image element, at least not inside the element if you want to nest more elements. Let's go to the next tool group. The next tool group is our pen and pencil. The pen and pencil is rather helpful if you want to create some short animations or graphics. Let's create this one. Up. So what's important here is if you just click somewhere, it will create a straight line. If you keep pressed it and then move, then you will create this Bezier curve. Up. And then let's do it straight again. Straight, straight, straight. Let's do a small Bezier here. So we have created our custom shape, which we can fine tune by a lot. We can add a fill, we can change everything again. That's the nice thing, is you can just play with it. In some cases, if you have already deselected it and selected again, you will see that it's now a shape. And if you do a double click, you will activate the edit mode again, which enables you to change all the details for this one. And if you press Ctrl and then on one of the points, you can also activate or deactivate the Beziers, which enables you to create some more interesting designs. In this case, it's probably a bad example, but you can draw with this one nearly everything. Especially if you want to build your custom icons, you should check out the pen, as it will be your best friend. And then with also pencil. The pencil itself is mostly used for annotations. It can be quite helpful to draw on top of your designs just to make annotations like this one, blue. This is only the basic tool. We have a complete draw mode in Figma things this year, which we will explore later on. When we discuss the modes, for typo tool we can simply select the text tool in the bottom bar or click T on the keyboard, press somewhere on the canvas so that we can either create a text element hacked to whatever we write, hello, there, which means the text element will have the size of whatever we write. Like you can see here, when I write more on one line, it will just get longer. If I write more on another line, it will be higher. In contrast, if we start our type tool activated, and drag it across our canvas, we will already set the text box. And if we write there, my treasure, we will see that the text will adapt to the text box. We can also change all the settings later on so that we can either use this text box style or the direct size based on the text we write. And then we have also the possibility to go a little bit more into the fine typography. Therefore, we can select the settings icon on the typography section. Then this flag will appear, which will have different tabs like basic, detail, and verbal. Basic will show you all the basic typography like the alignment, decoration, and the different cases, bullet points or no bullet points, or the paragraph spacing, while the details will show you more the nitty-gritty typography details. On first glance you will already see a lot of options, but beware that you can scroll this whole settings box, which shows you a lot more detailed typography options. Feel free to explore it on your own, as this one could be a video on its own. And then we have a variable. A variable is only there if you use a variable font. So try to use a variable font to make the font really your own. The variable font gives you different options. It gives you different options based on the selected font. In this case, we have the slant and the weight, which we can tailor to our needs so that it looks like nearly like our own custom font, which is cool. Feel free to play with it and create your own fonts, matching your aesthetic. Let's go to the next one. It's comment, annotate, and measure. A comment is there to comment things. If you go down to the bottom bar and open the context menu for the comment, we see comment, annotation, and measurement. A comment is cool if you invite other people into your document to make comments about the design, like, hey, can we make it blue? And then we can also add a screenshot, like creating a screenshot, pasting it into the comment, so that the other person or designer or PO knows what we want from him. Then we can click the send button, which will activate the comment. The cool thing here is you can also create a comment and use @mention. Just click Shift 2, and then you can select the people you want to mention. In this case, I want to mention myself. So there, send. And this will send it directly a message also to this person, so that they will get an email as well as a Figma notification, so that they know I want to have something from them. I personally tend to use it sometimes as a to-do list where I can work through, especially if you work with developers or designers. This one is quite handy. You can also, like you can see here on the right side, if you've activated the comment feature, you can also search comments as well as marking them as resolved, or you copy links so that you can directly copy the link to the comment so that the other knows what to do. You can also answer comments, like clicking on the comment bubble on the canvas. Then the pop-up will appear where you can write your answer. What do you mean? Okay, resolved, done. That's all about the comment tool. Pretty handy tool for collaboration. Let's go to the next one, annotation. Let's go to the next one, the annotations. And the annotations are annotations you can add directly to elements. For example, we could hover over some of our frames, then we will see that it tries to select them directly. Click on it, and then we can annotate the element directly. This is how the text should look like. And then we can also add properties, like add the height or width, or even some details about the font or the color. Let's say, for reasons, I add the height, and also add a category, like content, or let's say typography, edit category, add a new one, say typo, and done. Now we have added our first annotation. You can use it to annotate your whole design, but I personally don't use it as often because the developers have also dev mode where they also get the details. But it's also at the same time quite handy. Maybe you can implement it into your workflow to get it a little bit more structured. And then we have in the same category the measurement. The measurement can be handy, but the measurement can be handy for sure. If we have selected the measurement tool, we can select one element edge. On hover, you see these red lines appearing. Then we can drag it somewhere to measure. Nice. And then we can also adjust the measurement. It's a bit tricky, but the cool thing is, even if your design is not 100%, you can just change the measurement. Like let's say this one is 10 pixels, I just say it's 10 pixels. So with this one you have created your rulers. I think it's cool if you want to annotate specific parts of your design, but as mentioned, the dev mode should give you already a good glimpse in what you can do. So I don't use it as often, but especially if you work on a design system, this one could be helpful. And then the last item in the list is our lovely actions bar. The actions bar, let's press it, or press Ctrl K, is kind of the collection of everything. You can search here for either Figma own functions like remove background, or show hide pixel grid, or for a specific plugin you've probably already installed, like Contently. You can also switch the tabs to search only for assets or for plugins and widgets. Plugins and widgets will not only search your own plugins you've already installed, it will also search the Figma community for plugins, so that you can directly use them from there. Keep it in mind, as you will use it more often. We have even functions like a light and dark mode there. Use light mode, will make everything light, or use dark mode. Make everything dark. You can also use system to use the system mode. Okay, let's finalize our button bar with the mode change. On the mode panel, we have the draw mode, the design mode, as well as the dev mode. Those modes are relevant, as they will change the whole UI at once. Let's go to the draw mode. In the draw mode, we'll see that the whole UI have changed by a lot, which means you have bigger click areas, and also the tools and inputs have changed a lot, so that's easier to click and interact with them, even with a pen, which is especially useful if you have something like a Surface Pro, a Galaxy Tab, an iPad, or any other tablet computer. Most importantly, what you can see here right now at the bottom bar, we have also our pen selection. We have a classic pen, let's use it. The classic pen is kind of the pen we've already seen in design mode, where we can create icons and all the other shapes with it. It's already nice, but we've also brush and pencil. Let's go with the brush for a second. So what you see with the brush is that it uses directly a brush stroke, which you can also use, by the way, with any other frame or pen. It's just kind of a custom setting. So we can also switch between different default and custom brush strokes. Let's use another one like this. So you can draw your masterpieces step by step. If you have selected one of the pens, you have on front the color selection, which enables you to use a different color. And then you have the size selection, which you can drag from left to right to change the pen size. And on the right, you have all the presets as well as custom brushes, which you can create on your own. Oops. Nice. But like mentioned, we can also use the Move tool to select one of the brushes. As everything is vector-based, we can make also changes to it. Like in this case, I think I used probably the wrong brush. Let's experiment with another one. Oh yeah, this one looks nice, and I would like to have it also a little bit thicker. No worries, this is possible. And I'm crazy, I want to make some adjustments to it. Like mentioned, you can also change all of your brushes afterward. So just start to draw something and make the changes later on. But like mentioned, Figma is not like a real drawing tool, so you can use it, and I'm curious about your use cases. And then we have our design mode, which is the default mode, which we use to design our UIs. At last, we have our dev mode. In the dev mode, we are able to get the specific specs of our designs, which enables our developers to go in there and see exactly how an element is built, so that they can copy the values from there. You see in the right panel all the details like the border, padding, margin, and so on. And you can also see the generated CSS code. You can switch it to iOS or Android related codes, or even use a plugin. And then copy it to your code editor. And then you get also an overview of all the used colors, which is nice. If needed, you can also click the Export tab to export specific elements like icons. If we haven't selected anything, let's select just the canvas, we see that the bars changes, and we can change the settings for the dev mode. In this case, the default is CSS. We can change it also to SwiftUI or Android, so that also all the related measurements will change based on the need for the different platforms. Let's go with CSS and pixel values. Or RAM values. RAM values are actually slightly cooler. 16 pixels are 1 RAM, which is a more modern way to build websites, as they just tend to scale better with different screen sizes. And then you have the MCP server you can activate. The MCP server enables other code editors or LLMs to interact with your design and get all the details, which means you could create your design, your layout, your product inside Figma, and then connect Visual Studio Code or Cursor with it, so that the Copilot can get all the details from your design to build your own product out of it. This is something we will do later on in our masterclass, so kind of at the end when we are building our product, where we will learn also a little bit more about the MCP server and how to use it. Okay, let's close the dev mode by going back to the design mode. So I thought for the right panel we do something differently. Instead of just going to all the functions from top to bottom, I would like to give you a quick glimpse for the right sidebar, and then build a small card component together where we use all the adjustments inside the side panel, as I think it's a more efficient way for you to learn how to use those tools. In general, if we look on the right sidebar, we have there all the options for design or prototype mode. If you haven't selected anything, we will see the global site settings for the page, for example, where we can activate or deactivate the page. We can also manage our variables, as well as get an overview of our global styles and global effects, as well as exporting everything. And then we have underneath all the plugins. If we click on it, we can just open our plugins. This one shows only the plugins we used on this page, on the document. And from there on, you can just open them or remove it. In this case, I used the Notely plugin lately, so it appears here. If I open it, I can create new notes or whatever else the plugin can do for you, which can be quite handy. Hello there, green. Okay, close it and remove the note. Before we build our small product card component, we should think about what we may need for it. I think in most cases the card component will probably include the outer card wrapper. So card. Then inside this card wrapper will be an image. And then we will have a title and probably a description. What else? I think that's enough for now. Let's create our component based on this. So first we create a frame like this one. And as we created the frame, we can already see that the right sidebar have changed based on context. Which means in this case, we can see that we have created a frame. We can also change it to a section, which makes no sense in this case, as we need the frame component. Let's say that's ready for development, which makes also no sense, as we just started to work on it. And we can create a component out of it, which makes also not so much sense yet. We will work with it later on. And we can also use some masking tools, which we also don't need yet. And then in the next section, we have the position, which houses everything related to the position. The position will adjust based on the nesting, which means, for example, right now our main frame is on the root level, which means directly on the canvas, which shows you all the positioning based on the canvas. But as far as we create a new frame inside our frame for our image, let's say this one is now the image frame. Let's add a color to make it a little bit more stand out. And then we can select the image frame. And we recognize that the numbers are way smaller than before. If we go back to the main frame, we see that it has quite huge numbers for the position, which is because it is positioned on the whole canvas, while the new image frame we created is positioned directly inside the frame and also uses the positioning system from this frame. If we put it, for example, to 0, it will be now 0 related to the parent frame. And if we use the buttons on top to align it, we can also align it back to the center. So, as we have created already our frame and the image frame, we can now check also the layer panel and rename it to card. And then we can also rename the image frame to image to make it a little bit easier to work with. You have different options to rename the frame. You can either go and double click the frame in the canvas so that you can give it a new name. You can go to the layer panels, make a double click there, or you can click Ctrl+Command+R to rename it. If you want to rename several items, you can select several items, click Command+R, and you get this kind of batch rename, which is handy because there you can also add the current name plus the number, which will counting up or down automatically. Let's cancel it. Let's also position the text right now, like title. And then we would also like to have a description text, description. And now let's add some style. So, what we see here right now, this is now auto layout. Everything will just work randomly. The first thing we do for our component to make it a little bit more scalable, we will add an auto layout. Therefore, we go to the root element, check the layout part, and then let's do something simple first, resize to fit. Resize to fit will automatically remove all the white space around the parent, so that it will be exactly the same as the child elements. And then on the right we can use auto layout, which is exactly what we want to do right now. Before I click on auto layout, check out the button tabs underneath for vertical, horizontal and grid. As far as I activate the auto layout, it will add the auto layout to it and decide to use the vertical layout, which means if I now add new elements, let's edit, it will add it automatically in the layout and try to adopt the whole component or frame. Let's undo. And let's try the same without the auto layout. Therefore, we copy the card and deactivate the auto layout, and then do the same again by copying the description. And right now you will see it will just stack all the descriptions above each other, which makes for sure no sense for our use case. Therefore, we need the auto layout. The nice thing with the auto layout is once it's applied, it will also adjust the parent based on the content. So for example, if I just write down a little bit more to the description, like description, lorem ipsum, kind of a famous quote, Dolores Estus, you will see that the auto layout, the whole parent frame, will adapt to it. But for sure it looks probably a little bit strange without any spacing in between. Therefore, we can also decide how the elements inside the auto layout should behave. Like, should it be aligned to the right, to the left, or to the center? Therefore, let's use, instead of a fill for the text, a hug and hug element. Go back to the parent. And when we change the positioning, here you will see that the title will jump around, because the title will have only this hug size from the title itself. When we set it back to fill instead, like fill, it will fill the whole element and will stay where it is, which is nice. Okay, but I guess we would like to add some spacing and margins here and there. And therefore we also select the card frame and then either add a number directly to the spacings or drag on the icon. So hover the icon until you see it will change to this two-sided arrow, and then you can drag the number up and down to change the spacing. You can also go directly into the canvas, hover your frame, and then we will also see the handles, which you can adjust manually. When you press Alt, you will change the top as well as the bottom. If you don't press Alt while doing so, you will only adjust the top, which is nice. Okay, but to be a little bit more precise, I personally use mostly just the number inputs. This one looks already fine. But let's say I would like to have a little bit more spacing on the bottom. Therefore, I can go to this icon here to add a little bit individual padding. Let's add the individual padding and set it to 32. Nice, we will also already see that we now have a different padding there. So, and now let's go to our image frame, which looks a little bit silly right now because it has just this reddish fill. The nice thing with Figma is we can kind of stack our fills and also effects. In this case, we click on the top right in the fill section. The plus icon or the add icon, which will add more fills. We can stack them as we like. Let's add a small gradient fill. Maybe add also a small darkener to it, or something which looks a little bit more natural by going to the multiplayer palette. I think this one plus darken looks already nice. let's move it to a little bit more decent. This one is fine. Let's add another one. In this case, we choose image. Let's go image, upload our image. You can also drag and drop your image from your Finder or File Explorer, which is probably even easier. But for now, let's do it this way. And then maybe set up the opacity of the image to 100%. And we can also make some smaller adjustment, like changing the brightness, contrast, and whatever you need or want to change here. Looks nice. We can also, if we have authored already something in the library, use the library tab so that you can choose the custom fields you've already created, which is nice because it will adopt on all elements which uses a specific color or effect or variable, which makes life so much easier. But for now, let's focus on the image. And I think also that I would like to have kind of a more rounded border style to the image. Therefore, we can go to the Appearance tab and drag and drop it here and a number and see how this image gets a little bit more border radius. We can also say, hey, maybe we want to be a little bit more stylish, and therefore we can press the individual corners button so that we can set individual borders on each edge or corner, set it to 0 and done. For sure, we can also do it directly inside the editor. Just close the custom thing. And done. Okay, do the same for the card frame. Click the card frame and then also add a slight border here. So until it matches, I think this looks already nice. So normally you try to have a bigger border on the outside and a smaller border on the inside. If we want to have it pixel perfect, we normally try to calculate the inner border. This one is quite easy. We just use the outer border size. It's in this case 240. So 240, and then we check out the padding. It's 24. Okay, padding 24. Which then is minus, which we can then calculate by typing in the calculator 24 minus 420. And then we have 18, which means the inner image should have around 18 pixels to be perfectly aligned with the outside. So this would be kind of the perfect border. Looks nice. And then I will still want to have the flat edge on the bottom right. Nice. And then for the outer frame, I would like to add a small style. Therefore, in our playground, we've already defined this default gradient. Whoop. And by applying it, we'll also see it directly applied. Which means now we see here there's a style applied, which means we cannot change it individually. If we want to change it, we need to either unlink it, detach it from our frame, or remove it. If we want to create a new custom frame out of it, we can easily just unlink it, then adjust it to our liking. Oops, maybe like this one. Also change the gradient slightly. Smooth. And now we can use this one as a new style to use it also on other elements. Therefore, we can go to the fill section on the right bar, click this 4 dots library icon, then the library will open, and instead of selecting one of the items, we will go to the plus to the top right of this pop out, click add a new style, and say cut background, and create a style, which will now have created the current background style. If we create a new frame and check out the library, we will see there our new style applied so that we can use it. The nice thing is, if we click on the canvas and deselect everything, we can see on the right side right now our global styles. And if we go on the settings icon, we can change it, which will change also all the elements we used to the style, which can be pretty handy and makes your whole design a little bit more unified without too much clutter. Okay, I would say let's keep it this way. Looks already fine. Close it. And then I would like to change the typo a little bit. For the heading, I think bold title would be nice. Maybe we make also some fine adjustments for the variables to make it a little bit more bold or less bold. Yeah, let's go with less bold, but probably add a little bit more letter spacing. I think this one looks nice. And then for the description, we will also change to a smaller size, as it doesn't need to be as big. And for the line height, we go with 140%. Maybe even more, like this. Okay, this one looks already nice. Then we can also go back to the parent and select only the title and the description. This is something we do by selecting the title first, then pressing Shift and selecting the another element so that both of them are selected. And then we can either click on the right mouse button and on Add Auto Layout to add the new auto layout. Or we can click on Shift A to add the auto layout. In both cases, we should give it a name, like let's rename it in the layer panel to content. And then also change the space, Then also change the spacing slightly to 16, maybe even less, like 12. This looks already nice. Here I had added too much spacing. Let's go to about 40. And what you see here right now is that the spacing is differently from the parent frame and from the nested frame. This gives you enough flexibility to build your layouts. Just play with it a little bit. And for the image, we also apply now a small blend mode to have it a little bit more artsy. You will probably not need it as often in the daily work, but here, as we have the opportunity, let's just play with it. Yeah, just use overlay. And then for the typo, we would also like to add a small color tint. Therefore, we select the content container. And what's nice here, in selection colors at the bottom, we can also change the color of everything inside our selected frame. Let's add a small tint here, like this. Looks already nice. So in contrast, if we select the parent card itself, we can see under selected colors all the colors we have inside this card yet. So we added the card background for sure. We added also our typo color. We added the gradient. And we have also the old red fill from the image. We can just remove it by clicking on the image. And then in the fill section, we go either on hide or remove. We want to remove it. And then we may want to add also a small stroke to our card. Therefore, we can go to the stroke section, click Add Stroke. Now we have added stroke. Let's make it red just for showcase reasons. Okay, nice. What you will see here right now with the stroke, you will also have this inner stroke selected right now, and it will align perfectly with our calculation of the inner radius. Quick hack to recheck if your calculation is correct. So in our case, we want to have our stroke not inside, we want to have it outside to don't interfere with the card itself. Make it a little bit thicker. And then, like with the fills, we don't want to use a simple color, we want to use one of our styles. Let's use stroke and add it directly there, so that we have a nice gradient stroke right now. The problem is when you add styles directly to it, you cannot stack anymore, because the style should have included everything from the beginning. So therefore, if you want to be a little bit more free in your decisions, you can just unlink it and stack everything else on top, like other images. Yeah, let's stack the image on the gradient. Probably a strange decision, but you could do if you want to do it. Okay, let's remove the image again and also fall back to our default style. Another thing we could do is we can also add pattern as fill. Therefore, let's create a small drawing, like using the pencil. Maybe we even go to draw mode, as we are creative, right? Select the brush and draw the spirals. And now back to design mode, selecting the whole thing. Move it underneath the card. Let's also play a little bit with the texture fill. Therefore, we create a new frame and hide the white background, add a new one. And instead of having it a solid gradient, we use a pattern. And for the pattern, you can see there's a default dot pattern. Instead, we want to use our new draw element. Click on select source, then select our spiral. And then we can already change how the pattern should behave. Make it a little bit smaller, add some spacing to it, change the alignment on it, make it still smaller to have this nice texture feel, and add a little bit more opacity. And as easy as it is, we've created our own background pattern, which is nice. And what is even cooler, if we now change our source pattern, it will also adjust on the pattern itself. We can maybe add another stroke effect, like going to the stroke settings and using this one instead, which is nice because everything what you will do with your source graphic for the pattern will be radiated through the new texture pattern. Curious to see what you will create with it. And then we can also add a new fill to our lovely content frame. Therefore, we select the frame, go on add fill. We can reduce opacity maybe a bit, or instead let's use just one of our styles, add a gradient, make it 18 pixels, and then also add some spacing. So we have kind of this quite colorful card, but it is not a component yet. And I think we've also not used all the effects. I would say let's go to the effects panel and then let's create a component out of it. Therefore, we click on effects. There you have the option like on the others to either select one of your predefined effects or create a new one. In our case, we want to create a new one. Like we may want to add some of our effects to the cards. Let's go on our playground. On the playground, you can find the examples for the inner shadow, drop shadow, layer blur, background blur, noise, texture, as well as the glass filters. All the elements here are interactive, which means you can interact with them. That are no static images, so that you can copy those styles and see also what each of those styles do. So in our case, we go back to the lovely card we create. I long for a more natural card, so I would like to have it with a small noise texture on top. And like with everything in Figma, you can just play with it. Don't fear about destroying something. Okay, this one is already nice, gives this rough texture. And then let's also add texture. So the texture itself is different from the noise. While the noise adds only kind of a noise thingy on top, the texture also disturbs all the content slightly, so that you can create something like a draw effect already by just adjusting the variables. So let's go with this one. This one looks already fine. Maybe add a little bit more of the distortion. Yeah, this one will do the job. And then you can also find the clip to shape. A clip to shape will kind of rescue you in case you don't want to disturb your shape itself. Like you can see here now. If it's activated, it will clip the effect, so the effect will not change the overall form of the frame, while if deactivated, it will change the overall form of the shape. Okay, I think that's enough for the effects part. Like mentioned, you can check out the playground file to get all the details for the other effects and how to combine them. But I think for this video it's enough. We will dive in deeper later on in this series. And then we have also the layer guides as well as export section. The layer guides will add kind of a grid system on top to help you to align all your elements. You have also here some predefined, can be nice, needs to be adjusted. If you're interested, we can include it into our masterclass. If not, it's also totally fine. So let's remove it. And for the export, it's the export for sure, which will enable you to export the selected element. In this case, we see the default is PNG. We can change the multiplier. So in this case, 4 times means it will export it 4 times the actual size, which can be handy, especially if you want to create something for mobile. Then you should always long for the 2 times. And then we can also add more export settings here, like have also one time for sure. Then it will maybe make sense to have also an SVG export. And if you click the export button now, it will export the frame in all the exported formats you added. In this case, it would export our card component as SVG, PNG, and PNG. So one time in the regular size by 1 and another one by 2. Okay, you can also open the preview to get a preview of the exported element. Now let's create our first component out of it. We select our card and then we click on the right bar on Create Component, or we could use the shortcut Ctrl-Alt-K, or making a right click on the element to say Create Component. In all cases, you will create a component. How components work? Let's make a copy of it, like this one. You will see on the copies there's no diamond shape on the top left, like on our original, which means if we make changes in one of the duplicates, it will not be reflected on our original one. But in contrast, when I make changes on the original component with the diamond on top, like for example, I decide the image should look different, it will make the adjustments on all the chunks if they don't have already an override in place. So in this case, let's go with the overlay. Let's make a small override on this one and put it to, let's use the exclude. And if we now change it on the root, it will not override the override. Makes sense. It makes sense because it makes also sense for the text content. Let's say this is card 2 and this is card 3. And then we may add also a default card. Therefore, we want to reset all the content here so that we remove the overrides. Therefore, we can just select the content element, either in the layer panel or pressing Ctrl and left click, then right click and reset instance, which will reset everything to the original. So if we now change the title to title Lauren, you will see that the resetted one will get the new title, while the changed overwritten ones will keep the overrode, which is perfect for us. Okay, that's the basics. Then let's say we want to have different cards. We would like to have one card. Then let's assume that we want to have some kind of button also on our card. Therefore, we can create a text element and say button. Then we can press Ctrl-A or add auto layout. Added a lot of layers. And then we will see that it will get nested automatically inside a frame, inside an auto layout frame. From there on, we can make some adjustments, like this one. We can also go to appearance to add some border radius, and to make it a little bit more visible, we can also add a color like our default library color. For the button text itself, we long for a darker one, like this one. Then we call it button. We press also here on the create component, which is now our main component. Then we copy paste the main component button into the card and say with this fill container. Fill container is only possible if you position it inside an auto layout frame. If not, you cannot change between fill or hug. Keep this in mind. And what we can do now is on our component, we can go in and say, I would like to have this appearance more like a toggle which I can activate or deactivate on the childs to show or hide the button. In this case, I can go to the appearance section inside our main component, click on this icon here, and then click the plus, which will add a new property. The class is named show button, which is totally fine for now. Value is true, makes a lot of sense. And if we go now to the duplicates, we can see that there's a new property called show button, and we can activate and deactivate it based on our needs. But for sure, it can be that we also want to deactivate the image or the title or the text. Therefore, we do exactly the same. But it could also be that you want to have one special card and the rest should be kind of boring plain cards. Therefore, we go on the main component, click the plus on the right, add property, add variant, which will now show this dotted outline around our variant. And then we can either click, when selected, click the plus to add variant, or we can, keep it simple. Let's do it this way, click the plus. And then we can also add an auto layout here, change auto layout to the right, and maybe put the card to fixed for now. Also a little bit of spacing. But this card should be different than the other card. Therefore, I will change some of the stylings. This one only bluish. And also remove the lights from the button, can stay like it is, it's okay. And then we also may want to remove the border. And put the other one to border inside to avoid interfering with our grid later on. Nice. So now we can just use this component. Oh yeah, by using it you have different options. You can either drag and drop it with pressed Alt key to create a duplicate, but you can also for sure use our action center. So you can press on it directly in the bottom bar, go to assets and enter card, which will show our card component, which we can drag and drop on the canvas. But you can also click Shift I to open it and search for the card directly in it. Like this one. What we now want to do is we want to create some duplicates of the card and also select all of them, creating an auto layout around them by pressing either Shift A or on the auto layout section the auto layout button. Nice. And then we change the spacing inside the auto layout. What you will see here right now is that we have a fixed width with the auto layout, which means every new item we will try to adjust based on this auto layout, adding more. But it could also be that we don't want to have it wrapped. Therefore, in the auto layout section, if we select the main frame, we see this arrow wrap icon. If we deactivate it, it will be only auto layouted in one or another direction, like in this case horizontally, but we can also move it vertically. And we can also adjust the width based on the content. But in our case, we would like to have a custom width, and we would like to have it horizontally and wrapping like this, so that we can use it for our grid. That's already nice. Another quick tip for the images. One problem with images was always, since the last update, that's when scaling the image, you lose the aspect ratio of the image, which is for sure a bad thing to happen. But luckily Figma did some updates. You can select now the image and click on this lock aspect ratio icon in the layout panel, which will lock the aspect ratio so that it will scale always in the same ratio, which looks nice. So what we see here right now, the width and the height doesn't match up really. Therefore we can just position it and drag it in a size we would like to have, and then go on the width and set it to hug, which will hug the element. So we want it a little bit more width, so we set a fixed width and then set only the height to hug, so it will have the perfect height as you change the size. So for example, if I now add or reactivate the text, therefore let's add the properties for the text and select the text content and then go back to appearance, create a new one, which is show text, It's just a random name. You can name it however you feel like. Create property. And if we now select the duplicate, we see now the new property called show text. And if we activate it, it will also activate the text and adjust the cap layout accordingly, which gives you a lot of room for experimentations. You can also say, let's say with this case where we have some text here and there, but we still want to have all our cards the same size, at least from a high perspective. We can select all of them by pressing Ctrl A or simply selecting them in the layers panel, and then set the height to fill, which will set the height to the fill based on the wrap. After we have finalized our guide through the right sidebar, I would like to spend also a little bit of time on prototyping so that you get some of the basics here and there. And therefore, let's reuse our card component and create a small click dummy. The first thing we will do is we will just create a smartphone frame. In this case, iPhone 16 should work for us. We may want to make some adjustments to it, like adding a nice border and also changing the background to something nicer, which fits more to our overall tonality, like this one. And then we want to add our card component to it, and therefore we can either drag and drop our existing component into it, or we can create a new one by pressing Shift-I or the action menu and select Assets and enter Card. If we enter Card, we see our card here. We will move it inside the frame. Nice. Select the type Default. Then we will adjust the size to the frame, and then we would like to have a auto frame which stacks the cards from top to bottom. Therefore we go to the parent frame, to the iPhone frame, click on the vertical part, click orientation top, and every time when we add a new card here, click, it will add a new card. In this case we want to have this cards and we want to stack them. We can easily stack them by going to the main frame, overlaying them, which would be one option to handle this one. But we can also do something else. Instead, we will create a small slideshow. Therefore, we select all the elements inside the iPhone frame. We can either go and click on the parent frame on Enter to select all the childs, or we can select them manually, which is at this point kind of impossible. If we don't use the layer panel, with Ctrl pressed to select all of the cards, we can also, third way, click Ctrl Command A to select all the childs. And then we want to have also auto layout just for the scroller, for the slideshow. And therefore we go on the auto layout section in the right panel and click Use Auto Layout, or we make a right click to add auto layout, or we click Shift A to create auto layout, so there are a lot of possibilities. And then we change from vertical to horizontal, which looks already like a slideshow. What is the nice side effect here right now is that we have also kind of a psychological effect by cutting the shape, which suggests to our brain, hey, here's something cutted, maybe I should scroll, without even adding extra scroll arrow or stuff like that. These are just the small, nice tricks you can use to make your layout a little bit cleaner. Okay, that's perfect. But we want to scroll it. Therefore, make the parent frame a little bit smaller, like this one, or set it directly to fill. And then we need to go to Prototype and select Overflow Horizontal, which enables the horizontal scroll. So to test it, we go to the preview on the top right. We can also click on Present, but Present will add a new Figma tab, which we don't want to have yet, as we want to play with the prototype a little bit more. Therefore, we click on Preview, which will open the preview window, where we can already scroll a bit and interact with our small click dummy. Now, let's say we want to have a second screen, like a detail page. Therefore, we use the same frame, duplicate the frame by pressing Alt and moving it to the right, or clicking Ctrl Command D to duplicate it. And then we will make some slightly changes for the animation. The important part is that the naming stay exactly the same. This one is important, otherwise the auto animate will not work. For consistency reason, let's rename our scroll area scroll container and ensure that we have exactly the same name on the other artboard. Nice. And now I think on the second screen I would like to have bigger, like this one. And I probably doesn't need the other cards anymore. Therefore I will simply remove them and we'll put our main card to height fill. And probably also add an auto spacing. The auto spacing is easy added. For the auto spacing, you just need to go into the inputs and remove the number, click enter, and it will automatically set the auto spacing, which will space the components based on the available space. Okay, this looks nice. And now let's add some interaction. So, I want to click this button. Therefore, when the prototyping tab is active and the button is selected, I see these handles appearing. I drag them either to the top of the frame to use it as a back button. So every time when I click on it, I will go one step back, which I don't want to do yet. Instead, I link it to our new frame and decide on the trigger. It should be a click, makes a lot of sense. A drag, hover, and so on we are not using yet. And then the action shouldn't be navigation, makes a lot of sense. Destination is our new frame, makes also sense. And the animation type is not instant, it's smart animate, which will smart animate all the frames based on the namings. So smart animate, it's fine, and maybe set the animation duration to 600 and also add a nice gentle bounce effect to it. Let's test it. If we click here, we see that the size changes. Maybe we want to have a little bit more of a change. Therefore, we could, for example, change the padding to 0, 0, and also set our card to fill so that it fills the whole component. Perfect. Also ensure that our slideshow container also fills it. Nice. And I want to use the button here right now as back button. So let's name it back. And like mentioned, I could either go to the prototype tab, hover the button, drag and drag the handle to the previous frame, but I could also move it to the back on the top of the frame, which is exactly what we will do right now. Let's move it there and then restart our frame from here. Okay, nice. Let's click on the button. It will change, and when I click now on the back button, it will go back to the previous screen. So with this you can create some nice effects. And I think in the previous step we also created another property. Let's set it to special, and maybe we change also some more on the new screen to make it a little more visible. And change back the spacing to 24. And if we click now on the back button, nothing will happen for the simple reason we are on the screen right now and there is no history. That's why we will start the flow from scratch by clicking on our main iPhone frame. Then we will also see how the preview will change. And we can scroll here, which is nice. And if we click one of the buttons, let's click the button, we will see how we transition from one screen to another screen with a nice animation. You could be even more creative, but I think for this first Figma onboarding, this is more than enough. And you can also send your prototypes now to others. The nice thing with Figma is you can send the whole flow without sending the document file. Therefore, we need to go to the prototype tab, and then on the initial screen we see this blue badge saying flow 1. We can also rename it to prototype interaction. And then we can click here the preview button, which will open automatically the preview in an instant. Looks cool. And then you can also click on the share button on the top right and only share the prototype link by checking out the bottom half of the modal, which say copy prototype link. And now, after you have copied the prototype link, you can copy paste it into the browser to open your prototype in a browser, which means also that you can share it so that others can play with it. In this case, it works exactly like it worked in Figma. We have our slideshow, which is completely interactive, and then we can press on the card to go to the detail view and back. We can also add comments by pressing C, like nice one, nice one. So, and ideally you will get a notification whenever someone comments on your prototype, which will be directly visible inside Figma, which is nice. In this case, you can see that my noise appeared exactly where I put it in the browser, but in my Figma file. So I can work on it and can even answer it. Yeah. Maybe add an emoji. And done. Okay, that's everything for today. We discussed the foundational elements of Figma, or to be more specific, the different tools based on the layout positions. If you have a tool which you think could be interesting for you to learn more about it, feel free to leave a comment so that we can focus in the next session a little bit more on it. Besides this, I've also set up a small pool where you can decide on the project we're actually trying to create in this masterclass. I have 3 options. Feel free to vote for whatever sparks the most curiosity in you, and we will try to have a bi-weekly video release for the masterclass, so that I have also more time to prepare something more thoughtful for you. Besides this, don't forget to subscribe, don't miss the next